A world of supernatural intrigue and horrific mysteries are what await you in the world of Candela Obscura. Or at least that's what Darrington Press would have you believe. I'm Ginger Fraser, and today we're breaking out our magnifying glasses to investigate whether the setting of New Fair delivers a fun and terrifying world to explore. Is this a replacement for Call of Cthulhu or Vaesen, or is it something much, much more bleak? The world of the Fairlands is presented as a sort of neo-Victorian turn-of-the-century world similar to our very own. This quasi-steampunk interpretation of late 19th century Europe sets the players in the capital city of New Fair, a few short years after a brutal war resembling World War I. The after effects of this devastating conflict touch the lives of everyone in the city, your characters included. Beneath the city lies ancient ruins of a civilization destroyed by a magical calamity nearly 2,000 years ago. The ghosts of this massive graveyard are restless, and the magical corruption that sealed the fate of Old Fair is seeping up through the cracks and making its way into the lives of the current population. Your characters play members of an esoteric secret society known as Candela Obscura. This organization is dedicated to stopping the bleed of this dangerous force from tainting the lives of innocent people and investigating the paranormal phenomena that it generates in the world. This is done in the shadows, and most of the citizens of New Fair are blissfully unaware of the supernatural force pulling them down into the nightmarish past of the Fairlands. On the surface, this sounds like a fairly interesting world to explore in an RPG, but the setting as presented in the core rulebook is a mess of contradictions, and suffers from an overbearing moralism projected by the game designers. Not only is it ludicrously preachy, none of the jigsaw pieces of the lore actually make any sense or fit together in a way that can create a compelling world to play in. What makes a world compelling, first and foremost, is its verisimilitude. No matter how fantastical the nature of the setting, it still needs to ring true on some level. This is a game that wants to present a world full of conflict and horror for you to engage with, but strips out any meaningful way of doing that. The Fairlands are seemingly based off of late 19th century Europe, and New Fair in particular takes inspiration from London. They make it clear in this game that the Fairlands is an extremely culturally diverse region, but that these cultures largely live in harmony in the melting pot that is this city. There is no racism, homophobia, sexism, or prejudice of any kind. This goes so far as to depict sex work and prostitution as not only a legitimate business sector of the economy, but as a wholesome and socially acceptable practice in the Red Lamp District. This world leaves no modern progressive talking point absent. After the last Great War, the city was flooded with refugees from the surrounding region, and while this migration strained the resources of the city, the clashing cultures that you would expect to arise from such a disaster never materialized. In fact, the city seems to have prospered more than ever from this boost in diversity. This is clearly an aspirational view of the authors and how they wish the real world worked, but this sort of wonderful post-war integration has literally never happened in human history. Not only is this unrealistic and childish wish fulfillment on the part of the writers, this sort of sanitization of serious issues like war and migration sucks the drama out of the conflict they created. Forget about overcoming your characters' personal struggles and trauma that they and their loved ones have endured through this terrible conflict and their immigration and integration into a new culture. It's all fine and completely hand-waved away. Your struggles do not matter because the writers have solved them before they even materialized. This doesn't simply wash away the modern conception of racism in a good faith effort to make the game more tolerant or inclusive. It strips out any potential drama you could explore within the context of clashing cultures. Think about it. Would Boardwalk Empire have been nearly as interesting if the Irish, Italian, and Jewish mafias had no cultural differences? The society they're creating here is not even really multicultural. It simply destroys the cultures by putting them all in a blender and producing a sort of uniform gray goo. The book presents this city as a harmonious melting pot, but does not even provide you with any distinctive cultures from which to draw inspiration from. In fact, the game lectures you to be incredibly cautious when depicting other cultures. But which other cultures? What default cultural standpoint are the designers assuming on behalf of the players? And why the need to nag them about their choices they would like to make in the game? This sort of hand-waving and lecturing is near constant throughout the text. It seeks to dispel any place, any moment where interesting drama could potentially arise. For instance, take the police and criminality in New Fair. Criminal is actually a character archetype that you can play. This profession is described as embodying somebody who finds themselves on the opposite side of an unjust policing system. The unjust nature of policing, however, is never actually described in the book. We are simply told that the police are consistently using excessive force and motivated to lock up anyone and everyone whenever they see fit. Veterans of the Great War are increasingly opposed to this, as they did not fight for such a tyrannical institution. But this characterization of the police is clearly just a statement on modern politics in the real world, not the politics of the world in the game. Why are the police acting with such tyranny? What compels them to lock up the poor citizens of Newfair? The writers already established that institutional prejudice does not exist in the world of this game, so what is motivating them? The police are characterized as acting like they do in the current year in the real world, but lack any real motivations for doing so. They simply do it, and you're expected to just accept that at face value. This moralistic arrogance on the part of the writers is at odds with their utopian presentation of this perfect world. The moralism is completely unnecessary in the world that they've provided, since the issues they are chastising the player to avoid have already been solved. Additionally, the positive cultural impacts they've ostensibly created in this society are never even illustrated or explained. They can't highlight what makes this world better, only that you shouldn't make it worse. The game also mentions over and over again that the aesthetic of the world is Art Nouveau and Art Deco, but fails to explain or even show what the aesthetic is outside of a select few pieces of art. Given that the average critter has an IQ of around 75, you would think that Darrington Press would know that it would never even occur to their audience to try to look that up. The world is presented as more of a Victorian Gothic nightmare, with no sense of life or vibrancy to balance out the darkness intruding into the lives of the people. So what conflict does exist in this game? Mostly, the conflict exists in the form of supernatural incursions of corrupting magic seeping into the world. It's stated repeatedly that the general populace knows nothing about the supernatural world, and you would think that Candela would be kind of the sole organization investigating these mysteries. But this isn't the case. There are multiple factions in the world that are not only aware of magic, but are actively experimenting with it, promoting it, and in some cases trying to integrate it into public life. For instance, there's a special branch of the government that works as a supernatural police force charged with combating the same magical incursions that you are. Occasionally, this Office of Unexplained Phenomena will serve as antagonists to your group, but there are also times where they may call you in as consultants on a case. Enemy factions exist that traffic in magical artifacts that they're willing to sell to the highest bidder, while others try to pursue projects like installing magical teleporters in the subway system as a means of integrating magic into the daily lives of the people of Newfair. The book then tells you that the traffic of magical artifacts is in fact illegal, but also nobody really knows or believes magic, so when was this law passed? Who wrote it? How would anyone know that using magic is illegal in the first place? If there are entire government agencies dedicated to containing magic, and magic is constantly causing mysterious deaths and mayhem, wouldn't the people of Newfair begin to suspect that there might be something else going on? And this isn't a CinemaSins style takedown of the plot holes in this game. These are real questions that simply were not thought through when it was written. Anytime you're engaged in an investigation, you have to consider how this would actually be kept under wraps from the populace, and how opposing factions might intervene or escalate things. This is extremely difficult because you're faced with an onslaught of contradictions in the lore, and it makes the world impossible to portray with any consistency because the world has none. This puts the characters in a world that neither they nor their players could hope to consistently understand. Are they noble investigators working alone against an unrelenting tide of unstoppable horror? Or are they just kind of another contractor doing odd jobs in a supernatural mold and asbestos remediation program? And honestly, that is what this game comes down to. You're never making real progress against the incursions of the supernatural. You're simply maintaining the status quo. It's like a television series from the 80s or 90s where the events of previous episodes have made no tangible impact on the world of the show. It's honestly just boring. The game lacks consistency, except in how it lectures you about how to not play it. At Black Lodge Games, we suggest that you take that advice and avoid playing this game altogether. So if that's the case, what do we recommend in place of this steampunk diversity seminar? The answer is a game that you likely have never heard of before. It's called Wretched Epoque from the Red Room. Wretched Epoque fills the exact niche that Candela Obscura claims to. This is a game that is set in the Belle Epoque, the period of the late 19th century to the early 20th century, ending with World War I. Set in the gas and electric lit streets of 19th century Paris, you take on the role of supernatural investigators in a brilliant world of nouveau art and architecture. A supernatural dimension known only as the Beyond is breaking through the veil of reality and leaving its stain on the world. With the rich and endless history of the real world to draw on, the player and the GM have a strong base of verisimilitude on which to build their game. The Paris Underground has ancient catacombs to explore where any number of foul things can hide, whether it's the restless spirits of the ages gone by or hungry and predatory vampires who prey upon the sleeping citizens of the city above. Secret societies hold seances for the rich and powerful, while organizations like the Rosicrucians or the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn are delving into the mysteries of the beyond and communicating with the unnatural things that dwell there. The pseudosciences of the real-world historical period are given life and made real. Mad scientists use the wonders of galvanism to bring the dead back to life, and mesmerists use animal magnetism to influence their friends and enemies. All of this is set against the backdrop of the real-world politics and cultural conflicts of 19th century Europe, giving the players endless inspiration for incredible role-playing opportunities. Whether you are a conniving and murderous politician, a shameless prostitute, degenerate gambler, or paranoid occultist, the soil of this game is ripe for your imagination. Because this game draws on real-world history in an authentic way, the internal contradictions of Candela Obscura are nowhere to be found, and the aesthetic of this game is unabashedly Art Nouveau. The book itself is plastered from page to page with actual art from the period in question. It is beautiful and full of life and light to contrast with the extremely dark subject matter, whereas the light in Candela is totally contrived, shallow, and contradictory. Instead of chastising you before the game has even begun, Wretched Epoque delightfully and playfully invites you to revel in the sleazy underworld of Paris, to dance on that knife's edge of light and shadow. This game wants you to have fun, wants you to be scared, and knows that you are capable of handling both. It's a game made by adults for adults, and by people with extremely good taste, commitment to verisimilitude, and who actually love role-playing games. So come watch the dark and terrible films of Marcel Escoffier, fall into the machinations of the criminal mastermind Les Fantômes, and explore the horrific mysteries and pleasures offered by the Apostles of Pain. So if you missed our review of the Candela Obscura game system, be sure to check it out here and stay tuned for more videos about the Wretchedverse and other incredible role-playing games.